How would you describe the culture at Glory, Jens? What's your position on where you are with the culture in terms of its take-up by everyone? But how would you describe the culture?
Well, we work hard for the culture to be what we call a family. Everyone's part of the family. Now, normally in a family over time, people don't leave the family. But in a business situation, there's going to be a point where a staff member steals from you, will not learn the lessons and abuse other staff members or franchisees. And if they don't change, well, they have to depart the family. That's a very careful, decision at that point in time, but it needs to happen as part of the journey. So the aim, we'd like to see it as a family. Everyone's part of the family. And despite having 493 stores, 7,000 people around Australia who work in stores, although they report to franchisees, good franchisees create the environment where they're part of that family, and they take them out, do social events at their homes, so the staff feel they're part of that family.
In all families, there are relations we don't want to talk about sometimes.
Yes, that's true.
How do we deal with those?
Well, I have a view that both with staff or with franchisees, sending heavily worded emails is not the way to do it. It should always be a face-to-face. And one of the things I learned in advertising, it took me many years, how do you resolve confrontations? I used to work on the principle that if I could keep everything under control, it would all go away, and sort of manage the people who are in conflict with each other in the organisation. I learned that didn't work at all. It all just simmered there and got worse and worse. So I thought, maybe I've got to try something different. So I got both people in the room, because one used to give me a story, and if that's what that person's like, we've got to get rid of them. I'd go and talk to the other person, and you thought, I better go back and get rid of that one. And when you actually got them together and said, look, we seem to have a conflict, here's what the conflict is, okay, tell me, together. And while they're both in the room, they don't tend to embellish it the way they would on their own. And through that process, and some of it took time and some almost immediately with my input, we're able to resolve the disagreements. Yeah, I can't say everything was ever perfect. In a couple of instances never worked, and one person eventually left, or we had to work. We found one party was more at fault, and we had to deal with that, and they had to go because they just weren't willing to make something different. But I learnt a review system with staff that actually brought a lot of this stuff to the head, especially if it wasn't between people, but it was between them and the organisation, or them and their clients, or whatever the issue was. And that was a review process, because most people have these detailed reviews, long forms, boxes, 1 to 10. And we used to do it, I go, man, all we're doing is ticking boxes. So one of our guys came up with 4 questions. And this was the most powerful, I was sceptical, but this was the most powerful review system with a staff member. And the 4 questions were this: describe what your job is. How do you think you're going? Here's a second in that job. What would you like to be doing? And how can we help you get there? Now, it may seem simple. What they did was filled those 4 questions in, and they give it to you 2 days or 3 days before the review. You fill the same questions in on them and give it to them 3 days before. Now, I used to write in some instances. They used to think they're doing a fantastic job, they should be promoted, paid more money, etc. I'd write, I think your attitude is not very good because of this, this and this. We get to the face-to-face like this, and they'd sit there and they go, when you gave me that form, I was angry. But I've had a chance to think about it between now. So we had a great dialogue about them and the business and where they wanted to go. If I'd given it to them in a meeting like this and I got to read it, they would not be listening to the dialogue between us. They'd be getting angry inside. In many cases, it seems like a lot of people did, but a couple of cases people came back and said, I really think I should leave, which is actually the result I wanted. But they came to that conclusion. In other cases, they actually addressed the issues because it was an honest appraisal and it was a very powerful review.